So, starting off, what do you do and why do you do it?
I do my best to inspire and educate people about all the ways to have a more fulfilling, enlightened life.
Mm.
And I do that because there have been many times in my life where I felt less than free, less than vital, less than alive, and also many times during which I experienced a lot of suffering and discontent. And so I think overall, I'm just compelled to share solutions when I find them. I'm just someone who's been actively seeking truth throughout my life. And when I find a truth and apply it, and it has a meaningful impact on my life, I feel driven to share that knowledge with other people. And so essentially, that's what I've been doing for 27 years. And over the past 8 years, have done so in a more professional capacity
hmm
beyond just friends and family and things like that. So yeah, I would say I aggregate principles, universal laws that I find to be useful, and I share those with other people who care to use them too.
hmm Where did that journey start of wanting to find truth? Because I know I had a moment where it was actually Elle McPherson. She sent me this book, and it was the 5 Minute Gratitude Journal. And I started that, and I started thinking about gratitude, and then that led me to reading books, and it just inspired me on this journey of seeking after wisdom and enlightenment. And then once I had gathered enough for myself, it was kind of overflowing. And I was like, I don't want to waste this overflow. So that's why
Yeah,
I started this podcast. And that was kind of my outlet of sending it out into the world. So what was your start?
very similar. I think even as a kid, I'm just doing my best to kind of go way back in the Wayback Machine. I think just growing up in public school and never really fitting into that mode of learning
Hmm.
and feeling so uncomfortable and restless and feeling like such an outsider, not just of the system, but of the kind of predominant culture in the various small towns where I grew up. Um, there just always seemed to me as a kid that there was something missing in terms of the information I was being given about the nature of the world and reality and what our society values and the things that were being taught in school that
hmm
I didn't have interest in or proclivity toward, and was always kind of a round peg trying to fit myself into a square hole. And
hmm
that was, I think, just the fundamental yearning I had for something bigger than what was being offered.
hmm
And then, in a more dramatic way, when I was a kid, I experienced a lot of trauma and abuse and things like that, just by the nature of the family system into which I was born.
hmm
Which now I see as one of my greatest gifts, of course, because I've been able to transmute so much of that into my own growth.
hmm
But the path that I chose to deal with all of that discontent was drug abuse and addiction, and that
hmm
started for me quite young in elementary school into middle school, and by the time I
Wow.
was in high school, it got so bad that I got sent away to a reform school in Idaho, like a wilderness school. And that was a 2 year period. And that was the first time in my life from 14 to 16, which would have been 1984 to 86. A
hmm
long time ago for you and some of your listeners.
Yeah.
You can imagine way back in the day. It's funny though, it's like I'm 53 now, I'll be 54 this year. And when I think about the 80s, I think, oh, that's about 20 years ago. It's still it's
Yeah.
still 20 years ago to me for some reason. But
hmm
anyway, I got sent to this school, and that was the first time in my life that I ever really met any adults that I could trust, that I feel really cared for me and that would also be honest with me and were contextualizing life and education and the world in a way that rang true to me
Mm-hmm.
in my intuition, and also helped me to overcome a lot of the behavioral issues and mental health issues and things like that that I was dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
So that would have been the impetus to really start my awakening then. But when I left that school and came back into the public school model that I had had so many difficulties with, it kind of started the cycle all over again. And I didn't know how to relate to kids who hadn't had all of this psychological training and therapy and all of these things that took place
Mm-hmm.
at this kind of back then they used to call it the troubled teen industry, and I guess it still exists. I've seen a couple documentary, TV series about this industry, and it's rife with problems. Some of these schools are
Mm-hmm.
problematic for a number of different reasons. They are sometimes abusive to the kids, and many of them, including mine, had a very kind of cult ecosystem to it. So when I came out of that school, quotes
Mm-hmm.
for those
Yeah.
watching the video, because there was really no academic
Mm-hmm.
training curriculum at that school. It was all behavioral.
Mm.
So I had this
Yeah.
period in which I was able to address some of the things I experienced in childhood, and obviously got a bit of an understanding about the nature of my addiction and how that was causing me so many problems, et cetera. But when I got out, I didn't know how to fit in. And so I had a 2-year glimpse of the truth of just understanding my psyche and my motivation and some of the things that were my core issues that were causing me all these problems. But I came out and sort of fell back into um, the problems that I had in school, and then entering back into the system that still didn't make sense to me, and I couldn't make sense of it. And so that led to a 10-year descent into the fiery hell of addiction again for a second time.
Hmm.
And then when I was 26, that was 27 years ago, and that's when my real journey of healing began, because I was able to get sober and have been so ever since. And then I started to really experience some level of freedom and peace within, and started to learn how to meditate and doing yoga and taking care of my body physically and detoxing and getting into supplements and herbs and just all forms of healing on the planet. And like you, once I started to kind of discover some of these truths about myself and around spirituality and just what makes people tick and what leads to suffering and what leads to peace, I started to be compelled to share that information with other people. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's, I think as many of us go through a pain to purpose sort of story, right? You go through challenges in life, and I think if you're someone who's a kind-hearted, benevolent person, as I have always been, even when I was a kid and had all these problems, I was still always loving and cared about people.
Mm-hmm.
And I just didn't have the ability to really actuate that into my behavior and my relationships, because there was so much internal turmoil and pain
Mm-hmm.
still festering. And once that started to become healed, even in the early days of my addiction recovery, I realized that I could actually be of service to people and be useful, even though in the beginning I didn't have a lot to offer. I had more to offer than someone who was even newer than I was to their path of healing.
Mm-hmm.
And I found so much, and still do so much satisfaction in that, as someone who had led a life that was very much in based on survival and selfishness and just self-protection, and just trying to find a way to cope with being a kid and dealing with these demons in my closet of the abuse that I went through and all of that. It was the first time I started to become free. And I thought, wow, if I put A, B, and C together, and I'm starting to become more free and am able to smile and be a functional member of society and kind of find my niche in the world and feel like I fit in somewhere, maybe it's possible for other people to feel that too.
Mm-hmm. Going through addiction and now overcoming it and being on the other side of that, what advice would you give to people around my age and my generation who either are considering experimenting with drugs or alcohol, or maybe that they already have and they feel trapped?
Yeah, I can remember that whole trajectory of escalation so clearly. For me, I think just because the things that I went through as a kid and where I happened to be situated geographically when I was growing up, as I said, in elementary school, middle school, there were just a lot of drugs in my environment, so they were easy to get to. And
Mm-hmm.
culturally, I grew up in the Bay Area, and so this is, I grew up in the 70s, basically after the Haight-Ashbury 60s hippie movement had sort of imploded, and a lot of those people migrated up into the areas north of San Francisco, which is where I grew up. And so there were just a lot of drugs around. So for me, it was never a moral issue. I didn't think that it was wrong because it was so prevalent. And I think that's true, probably for people your age now, right? Because,
Mm-hmm.
cannabis is legal and acceptable in many places. And
Yeah.
I'm sure there are more drugs available to younger people now than there even were in the 70s and 80s, right? I mean, it's like time has sort of sped up, and as a society, especially in America, our value system, I would say, has even degraded even more than it was when I was a kid. So my advice would be,
Mm.
certainly not from any place of morality, that ingesting a certain substance is right or wrong. It's a matter of whether or not it's right or wrong for each individual.
Hmm.
So for me in my life now, for example, I choose to not drink alcohol, and have chosen so for many years. Not because I think there's anything inherently wrong with alcohol or wrong with drinking alcohol or getting drunk, but it's just that the consequences it has on my life aren't worth the benefit that I might get out of it, right? Of going to a party and feeling a little more comfortable in my skin and being able to be social or ask a girl out on a date, or just to have fun, just to feel
Mm-hmm.
free and cut loose, or
Mm-hmm.
smoking weed for me as a kid. We used to have these things called a Walkman, which is
Mm-hmm.
like a little cassette player, and you put on headphones. And oh, man, I would just, I'd listen to Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath and ride my skateboard and be really high, and I just felt so free. And so I would never tell a young person that it's morally wrong to have that experience, because some of those experiences are also things that opened me up to
Huh.
a deeper and greater understanding of the world, right? I mean, when you're laying in the middle of a field, you're 14 years old and you're high as hell on weed, it expands your consciousness, and there are things that you start to think about and feel and ways that you express yourself that can be quite positive. So the way that I kind of look at anything now in my life, because I do periodically work in a very intentional way with psychedelics, which some people would consider drugs, and they
Yeah.
would consider something like psilocybin mushrooms the same thing as cocaine or something. To me, there's a very different experience and very different relationship with different substances. But
Yes.
to answer your question in a more succinct way, I would ask myself if my habits or behaviors or even potential or full-fledged addictions are causing me and my life more harm than the benefit I'm getting from them, it might be time to take an honest look at that.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, I I would say, if I'm really honest, oh, here we go, put this in camera. I chew these little nicotine lozenges all day, every day.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm really honest with myself, I would say I'm addicted to nicotine. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not proud of that. I'm not ashamed of that. But if I'm honest, that is a reality in my life right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still at that point where the mental alertness and focus and just kind of I don't know, oral fixation, whatever it is, about just like constantly, it's like if somebody chews gum because they're nervous or something, they get
Mm-hmm.
some benefit from chewing gum, right?
Yeah.
It's something to do with your hands. It's just like
Mm-hmm.
one of those things that you habituate to. So even though I feel like the relationship I have with that particular substance, nicotine, is on the addictive side of the ledger, because I don't feel like I can choose when I do it, and when I don't do it, I do it compulsively and automatically. I wake up in the morning, I put one of those things in, and so I don't feel great about that.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason I haven't stopped is because the benefit that I get from using that nicotine as kind of a nootropic, performance enhancer, focus,
Mm-hmm.
etc., is still greater than the consequences that I might experience as a result of just not feeling good about the fact that I do it more than I would like to. You see what I
Yeah.
mean? So it's like, it's not a matter of right or wrong with using substances, whether you're younger or older. It's a matter of whether or not it's right or wrong for you right now at this point in your life. And
Mm-hmm.
so I would say the first thing is developing some honesty with yourself about how deep you are into something, right? Are you just experimenting? You go to a party, you smoke a little weed, maybe you have a couple beers, you don't tell your parents, you don't want them to know, you'd probably get in trouble, but you still have it under control. If your parents are of a cultural sort of standing where they would not understand that, or that would be terrifying. I think in
Mm-hmm.
some cases the communication might not be open and safe enough for
Mm-hmm.
a younger person to share that with their parents.
Yeah.
But if somebody's kind of veering into the problematic range of using any substance, if you can't talk to your parents about it, I think it's really important to have even a close friend or a mentor or someone that you can go to where you can share the experience as you're moving through it, with someone who's not going to be judgmental or condemn you or try and get you in trouble, but just so you're not the only one sitting with that secret, right?
Yeah.
Because as in the realm of addiction, when your behavior is out in the open, you know what you're doing, other people that care about you know what you're doing, and so the slippery slope is a lot slower because everything's kind of out in the open.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when you get into the realm of legitimate addiction, especially if you're younger and you're still living with your parents, etc., the secrecy is what starts to actually make you mentally and emotionally more uncomfortable. And then that has the potential to compel you to do even more drugs or to drink even more, because now you feel ashamed that you're doing it. You
Mm-hmm.
have no one to talk to about it. You don't like feeling the shame, so what do? You reach for the substance again and you do more of it. And so it's really a vicious cycle. So there's kind of the
Mm-hmm.
pre-addiction, starting to dabble, experiment, which is totally normal, I
Mm-hmm.
think, especially nowadays. Then there's the, I don't know, this might be a problem, I don't have anyone to talk to about it, my parents wouldn't understand, so I'm just going to keep it inside and start lying and keeping it secret. And then there's the third stage, which is where you even know yourself that you're full blown addicted to whatever it is that you're using and that you can't stop. And now your whole life starts to become a lie, because you have to lie to cover up for your lies, to cover up
Mm-hmm.
for those lies, to cover up for those lies. And next thing you know, you start feeling very isolated and alone because there's no one that truly knows you, because you're keeping all of those behaviors secret so you don't get in trouble. Or especially if you're really an addict, you don't want anyone to interrupt your self-soothing, right? That's the way you're coping with being in
Yeah.
school or problems that you have in relationships or whatever it is. You know, your job sucks, you work at the mall, you hate it, you're frustrated, so you get high after work to just like diffuse that stress, whatever it is, right? It's
Yeah.
like when you're in the realm of addiction, it's very isolating, and the isolation and loneliness that it creates makes it, for many of us, this was the case for me, just impossible to even think about quitting, because that's the only thing that's kind of holding you together. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
used to feel like even when I was like, I mean, they say cannabis isn't addictive, but for me, it was very psychologically addictive. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
would like have panic attacks, temper tantrums. I would do anything to make sure that I was high all day long, every day when I was a teenager, and even before I was a teenager. And so, because I had to hide it from my parents and teachers and police and all that, then it was just me alone with that addiction. And even if I had needed help or felt like, wow, this is becoming a problem, or I'm starting to do other drugs that are potentially dangerous, way more illegal, you can get in a lot more trouble for doing them.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't going to go tell my parents, hey, by the way, I've been like doing a bit of coke, at school. There's some in my locker. It's like, what am I going to do with that? Right. So that the
Yeah.
secrecy and the deceit and the lying seems like, when we're doing it, it seems like we're doing it to protect ourselves, right? Because we just want to do our thing. My parents don't understand. Teachers don't understand. Maybe they send me to a therapist because I'm having problems. The therapist doesn't understand. So I'm just not going to tell anyone what's going on inside. And
Mm-hmm.
that can lead to a really dangerous place, because when you're alone and you feel alone, it's really painful.
Mm-hmm.
And if the only way you know how to cope with pain is by taking more drugs, which was the case for me, it becomes really, really problematic. And the last thing I'll say, because it's like a topic I could talk about for 20 hours straight, and I want you to get to your other
Mm-hmm.
questions, presuming you have them,
Yeah.
is that when you've truly crossed the line into clinical addiction, and again, all this is my personal experience. I'm not a trained therapist or drug counselor, so everything I say is just my own belief based on my own inner knowing and my own life experience, which in this category is quite extensive,
Yeah.
for better or for worse. But what I found for me, I'll just say it this way, is when I was, in my 20s, I was living in Hollywood and playing in rock and roll bands and having a great time for a couple years. I mean, it was fun. I had a fake ID. When I moved there, I was 19. I mean, I was living the dream, right? But it slowly morphed into a nightmare as I got deeper and deeper into addiction. And what I found to be true, and kind of how I would classify true addiction, is when you realize fully that you're trapped and you can't get out, and you start trying to modulate, stop using certain substances or stop using them all, and you cannot stop on your own volition, your own free will isn't strong enough to do the
Mm-hmm.
job, that's when you have a real problem. And for me, what was necessary was to seek outside help. There was just no way, by this time my parents knew, because I was, I'm in my 20s, I left home, I can never pay my rent. It's very obvious that I'm a total basket case. Just a lot of problems with
Mm-hmm.
the authorities and all kinds of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I knew I had a problem. I knew I wanted out, but I also knew that I couldn't do it because every time I tried, I would fail. I would make it a few hours, and next thing you know, like, I'm drinking again or doing drugs again, and just going, God, I was like, I woke up today so committed. Today's the day, I'm going to change my life and turn it
Mm-hmm.
around and get a job and, grow up and pay
Mm-hmm.
my bills and do all those things. And I literally could not do it. I was just constitutionally incapable of that. And so the huge turning point for me was when I finally surrendered. I finally just said, wow, I can't do this on my own. And I remember I called my mom one day, and thankfully she had enough understanding of addiction and things like this, and, knew what rehabs were and all this kind of stuff. And I called
Mm-hmm.
her and said, man, I don't know what to do here, but I can't do this one more day. I just can't. It's killing me. I was just so, oh my gosh, so miserable, man. I can't even describe the level of pain that I was in, and I couldn't get out of it. So she
Mm-hmm.
set up, a date to enter a treatment center a couple of days later, and I'm on a plane. And, I'm so grateful always to my mom. And, I think when you're younger, like you are, and some of your listeners, sometimes we view our parents as adversaries. It's sort of part of just growing up. I think nature
Yeah.
designs us to kind of push away from our parents and just, be annoyed by them and think they don't understand. And, we might have disagreements or arguments with them. And maybe we even run away from home because our parents suck. And some parents do suck. Parents that haven't healed their own stuff and are still dysfunctional and might have their own addictions and might be
Mm-hmm.
violent or abusive. So I'm not saying by any means that all parents are deserving of our company and our relationships if they're unkind to us, but just the general like feeling we get like, oh, my parents wouldn't understand. Well, my mom proved me wrong. I called her and she didn't shame me, she didn't berate me or criticize me or anything. She just said, don't move. I'm on the case. Book me a plane ticket. Next thing you know, I'm in a treatment center. And for me, because I was not just someone that was experimenting with drugs here and there and kind of like getting a little sloppy, I was really, really addicted to some very strong drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it was getting that outside help and being in an environment with people who truly understood me. And when I was with people that truly understood me, which is other former addicts and the counselors and even the other patients, that were in the treatment center, because they understood me, I could be honest with them and I could be vulnerable and I could just let all of those years of lying and deception and all of the hiding and pretending and all of that just sort of dissolved. And when I could be real and be honest with those people, because again, I felt that they understood me and I understood them,
Mm-hmm.
then that sort of allowed for, not sort of, in a very pronounced and finite way, allowed for the exploration of spirituality. And I mean, there's no other way to say it. It sounds kind of corny, and especially just in young people. If I would have heard this when I was 17, I'd be like, this guy's lame. But I started to pray for the first time in my life, because
100%.
that's
Yeah.
literally the only choice I had. And I didn't grow up with religion, spirituality. That was not part of my childhood at
Mm-hmm.
all. My parents were just secular people,
Yeah.
atheists, maybe. Well, maybe not atheists. That's a little strong. Agnostics,
Yeah.
it was just not talked about. Nobody went to church. It was just not a thing. And I still am
Mm-hmm.
not a religious person per se, but I'm very devoted to God because of
Yeah.
what God did for me. That's really the only explanation I
Mm-hmm.
have as to why I'm not in jail or dead. Is just I
Mm-hmm.
reached a point where I realized I could not help myself. I asked my mom to help me. She put me in a place where there were a bunch of other people that loved me and understood me. They helped me. And what those people told me was the only way out of this is through a spiritual way of life, of learning how to meditate and pray, and that there's a power in the universe that is more powerful than you by yourself. And if you align yourself with that power and avail yourself and ask for help, that this thing that created you really loves you and is just waiting for you to kind of come home and say, hey, here I am.
Mm-hmm.
And once I did that, the very day that I prayed the first time, Solomon, it's crazy, dude. I love telling this story because it's just, I still can't even believe it worked. The second day in rehab, I woke up and I was in bad shape, my friend. I was hurting for certain. And
Mm-hmm.
I got up and I didn't have anything to do but pray. So I started to pray. I just said, God, help me. I don't want to be an addict anymore. I want to be sober. Just help me, help me, help
Yeah.
me, help me, help me. And from that day until this day, sitting here talking to you, I've never once had a craving or had any crazy ideas that, maybe I could just have a couple beers, or I could
Mm-hmm.
just smoke a little weed. It'll be all right. The kind of rationalization that used to get me into trouble before.
Mm-hmm.
I just never had those kind of crazy thoughts. There's like a sanity and an understanding in my mind that has been restored, where I just know I'm the type of person that just can't take that risk. And so I don't. But more importantly, I don't even have the desire to take that risk. It's not like I'm
Mm-hmm.
sitting here biting my nails going, I wish I had a drink, or I wish
Yeah.
I could just do bong rips all day like I used to. It's like it's like a non-issue. I'm in
Mm-hmm.
a position of neutrality, right? Where it's just like, it's just not something I think about, not something I care about. And I've had to, of course, do a lot of work over the many years to make sure that I keep that protective veil activated through
Of
my,
course. Yeah.
my spiritual life. But that would be a very long-winded explanation of kind of the different degrees and the different stages of addiction, and what one might do to kind of deal with it along the way.
Yeah. Number one, your story is amazing and inspiring. There were a couple things that stood out to me that I loved how you put it. Is you didn't say it was like abstinence and it was this thing is bad and I need to like when you were talking about the Lucy's, like you were like, this is a thing and it's just kind of cost benefit analysis. You're just saying, is this thing gonna be beneficial to my life? And then what are the cons of it? Are there cons? And just weighing that out. And then also the shame. I love when you talked about the shame, because I think so much people have shame, whether it's substance addiction or it's pornography or it's whatever the thing is that makes them feel like they are trapped. They have so much shame around it, and having the courage to step out and to say, I need help, and raise your hand. That's, I mean, for me, when I struggled with different addictions, even with like stupid things, like I just would constantly make things about me. It was a selfish addiction. I just wanted to feel selfish, and being like, I am selfish, and admitting that, and just saying that. It was like, it was things that you feel like are so big in the dark, but once the light shines on them, they're not as big. And also, once we weren't made to do this alone. In Genesis, man was lonely. God made Eve for Adam. We weren't supposed to do this alone. We were supposed to have someone with us to help us through it. And part of it was God for you. And I would say that that's the same thing for me. It's having that supernatural, but also part of it is just having that person that steps alongside you, who wants the best for you, who wants you to grow and be the best that you can be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, asking for help is also, we're always working on something, right? This is something I've realized in my elder years, is that if you're someone who's driven toward growth and expansion, which I
Mm-hmm.
am, and you clearly are as well, sometimes it's difficult to see the progress we've made along the way, because we're
Mm-hmm.
looking on the next thing we need to work on, right? So I'll just
Yeah.
preface it by that. So sometimes I forget about the tons of coal that I've already shoveled. I'm just looking at the little pile in front of me. So something
Mm-hmm.
I've been working on recently, to the point of this topic, is how difficult it is still after all these years for me to ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm really great at helping other people. I enjoy my life so much more when I'm able to be of service and be considerate and kind to other people, help people out. I'm very generous. I love giving people stuff. I just gave someone a bunch of furniture yesterday. I could have sold it on Craigslist, and I don't know,
Yeah.
probably made a couple $1,000s. And it's like, this other person would benefit more from having
Mm-hmm.
this stuff than I would from having a couple bucks. So
Yeah.
just little things like that. Sometimes big things, some like little things. But
Mm-hmm.
so I'm really good at that. But the receiving, asking for help and receiving, is still really difficult for me.
Hmm.
And even to this day, I mean, I had this experience yesterday. I was having a really tough day for a number of reasons. And the last thing I think of is like, man, I should call a homie right now and just express my feelings, or I should sit down with my wife. It's like my first response is to just go be by myself and just kind of
Mm.
wallow in it or try to figure it out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think anything, whether it's like a hardcore addiction or just anything that you're struggling with, man, just speaking it to life
Mm-hmm.
and getting it out of the echo chamber between our two ears can
Yes.
be so powerful. And the trick with that is just building our inner circle and cultivating those relationships so that we have people that are safe to do that with.
100%.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, I know for young people, and this was definitely the case for me. I mean, talking to my parents about my issues was not an option. That was not going to happen because they
Mm-hmm.
had their own issues going on. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's easier. Like, your dad is, I don't know your mom yet, but your dad is super conscious, awake guy. He's working on himself. He's got a huge heart. He's really smart. So I think, well, man, if he was my dad, I could have talked to him anytime. But that wasn't
Mm-hmm.
my experience. I kind of had
Yeah.
to go it alone. And, as I said, eventually I met counselors and things like that, and therapists that I could talk to, with whom I felt safe, and that also had some degree of wisdom and life experience and expertise that could help me overcome my problems.
Mm-hmm.
But man, asking for help for some of us is really hard. It's like, there's a lot to it. I've looked at why that is. Part of it is like a pride thing, just like, nope, I'm going to figure this out. I'm just going to like put my nose
Mm-hmm.
to the grindstone and get it done. Part
Yeah.
of it is a shame thing, not wanting to be vulnerable to show people that you're not perfect, that even
Mm-hmm.
you, the great whoever you are, has problems.
Mm-hmm.
It's a self-worth thing sometimes, of feeling like I don't want to burden people, because who am I to give them more work to do? You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? It's
Yeah.
like, I don't want to lay this on my wife or lay this on the homies. It's like, I don't want to bother them. I don't want to be a nuisance, that kind of thing. When the beautiful thing about asking for help is that you're also enabling the other party the opportunity to express their love and to
Mm.
give.
Yeah.
In other words, like, imagine a world where nobody asked for help, then no one would have the opportunity to give. And giving is like life's greatest
Mm-hmm.
gift. So I've trained myself, and not perfectly, as I said, I still forget this, but when I'm feeling like I want to ask someone for help, even it's like asking a friend, hey, will you come help me move this sofa, or whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
insignificant to the most meaningful, I do my best to remember that I'm doing them a favor by asking them to do me a favor, because I'm allowing them to kind of earn karmic merit points, right? I'm putting someone in a position where they can help me. And ultimately, that's also helping them,
Yeah.
because they get to get out of themselves. They might be going through something really difficult that I don't even have any idea they're struggling with. And they sit on the phone with me, or we go to coffee, and, I pour my heart out and just process some things I'm working on. And probably much of the time helps them get out of their problem,
Mm-hmm.
because they're in kind of a, self-pity or self-absorbed rumination like I am, and we both help each other get out of it by just sharing our hearts and being open and vulnerable and
Mm-hmm.
communicating on a deeper level, other than just, did you see the game last night? Oh, what about this TV show, or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
like when you get past the superficiality of relationship and communication, there's some real magic that can happen when you get, two or more people together with the goal of healing, understanding, expressing themselves, working through
Mm-hmm.
difficult emotions, overcoming different fallacious or erroneous ways of thinking. Sometimes just getting someone else's perspective. It's like, I'll have some
Yeah.
crazy ass thoughts that seem very real,
Yeah.
and if I can run them by someone with some life experience and wisdom, they can reflect back to me what parts of my thought process or ideas I'm holding on to ring true or not. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that's difficult to do by yourself, but you get someone else like, did you hear what you just said? And I go, yeah, repeat it. And I say it again. Oh my God, that's totally crazy. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Until someone else said, dude, the thing you just said sounds really nuts. I think that's your mind playing tricks on you. And I'm like, oh my God, I could have gone on for the next month bouncing these dumb ideas around my head until somebody that I trust, that's not going to use that information against me or try to punish me or manipulate me, right? I'm talking in the realm of like functional, healthy relationships, where
Mm-hmm.
that kind of communication can be so beneficial, because you can call each other out on your bullshit, to
Mm-hmm.
be frank about it. So
Yeah.
that's, again, a lesson I'm still learning, but it's
Mm-hmm.
so important, is to be able to ask for help and to be able to receive when it's time for you to receive.
Mm-hmm. I was the same way. I used to struggle with that, and I think the lesson really got taught to me young. I have a specific guy. His name is Brandon. He's my mentor. He's the best. He got we met my first year of high school. He was a youth pastor at our church, and he saw something in me. And I mean, till this day, he's been just developing me and really just pouring into me. And even in the times when I hated God, he didn't shun me and be like, oh, you're a lost cause. He was there for me. And seeing him do that to me has made, and he was, you said inner circle. He was one of the guys who was like, you need an inner circle. You need to have people in your life who you, one, are pouring into, but also who are pouring into you. And sometimes it's reciprocal, sometimes it's not. Um, and you just have to kind of gauge that and feel that out. But I think the importance of pouring out your, spilling out your crap and being like, I'm mulling over this and I'm freaking out right now is so valuable and important.
Yeah. I, Another thing I'd like to comment on is, religion and church and things like that. And when I was a kid, I feel like, I mean, just speaking of Christian denomination
Mm-hmm.
churches, it was very much, it was old school, I mean, I remember being
Yeah.
a kid, and one time I got sent to like a summer camp, just like for fun, right? And it was a
Mm-hmm.
Christian summer camp, and this is in the 80s, and I was really into like heavy metal,
Mm-hmm.
and in the 80s, heavy metal was demonized for being
Yeah.
devil worshiper music and all this kind of stuff. There was all this censorship. They in the
Yeah.
80s, when they started putting the parental warnings on records, you see them like on rap albums
Yeah.
now. But back then it was like heavy metal because they would say a
Mm-hmm.
swear word or something. So anyway, it was like, and there might have been other churches that were a little more progressive, but the church that very little that I was exposed to was like, if you listen to metal, you're going to, when you die, you're going to live in hell for eternity and be burned alive because it's a sin kind of thing, So there was a lot of
Mm-hmm.
scare tactics and fear, and a lot of judgment around sexuality, and just it was like very
Mm-hmm.
much based on um, constructs of right and wrong and being a sinner
Mm-hmm.
and this kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
over the past few years, there have been a few times where I've gone to back when I was living in LA, I went maybe 2 or 3 times to churches that were kind of these mega churches, and they were, there's like a rock band playing, and there's
Mm-hmm.
people of all different ages and
Yeah.
races, and people are kind of dressed sort of hip. People have tattoos, and I'm sure there's people of different sexual orientation and all kinds of stuff, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
when I was young, at least the very little exposure I had, it didn't feel like a safe place. It felt like a place where I was going to be judged. And the way God was talked about was like, it's like when I hear people say the phrase, I'm a God fearing man, that always sounds weird to me. Like, fear God. I don't want a God that I have to be afraid of. I want a God that loves me, that I can love, that can help me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a positive trend in Christianity now in general where there's a more accepting kind of progressive approach to the Bible and things like that. That's super cool to look at someone like you that can, I'm assuming, go to a church and have like a youth pastor, and it's like not as restrictive and judgmental and kind of
Mm-hmm.
dogmatic, where you can go in and actually enjoy the support in the community
Mm-hmm.
and worship in your own unique way and not be beholden to such a rigid, restrictive kind of culture, So I think that's super cool. And the few times I have been to church in the past few years has been really fun. I'm like, whoa,
Yeah.
if church was like this when I was a kid, it probably could have really helped me.
Mm-hmm.
But the couple times I went, it was just like, oh my God, just scary music, and it was just like
Yeah.
creepy, It
It's
was
like
just
grab
like,
your book and read it, and yeah.
it was like
I
bad energy, for me. It was
a
just like,
hundred percent.
this feels like a horror movie. I felt like I was on the set of The Exorcist or something. It was just like creepy,
Uh-huh.
And I'm sure that,
Yeah.
like I said, I'm sure there were, because I only had a couple experiences, I'm sure there were beautiful churches and congregations all over the world. I just didn't happen to go to them. So, for, young people listening too, I would just encourage people to be open-minded
Mm-hmm.
about any kind of, whether it's like a meditation group or a breathwork
Anything. Yeah.
class, a Christian church, a mosque, a synagogue, Hindu temple.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really important to find the value in the teachings of religions, because all the religions are essentially saying the same thing in a different way, in a different language, right? If you
Yep.
boil them all down, I think they all kind of boil down to the 10 Commandments, pretty much.
Yep.
you know so if you just take, okay, there's some truth here, which if we all apply it to our lives in our own unique and beautiful ways, it's going to benefit each of our lives. But the community element is really, really important. And
Mm-hmm.
I never had any of that as a kid, but when I got sober, I immediately became very committed to 12-step groups, 12-step meetings,
Mm-hmm.
and did that for 22 years. And that was like my family. That was my church. We're all people that are going there for the sole purpose of helping ourselves, for getting closer to God in our own unique ways, and to love on each other and support each other. And there is no way on earth I would have ever been able to stay sober or even have the beautiful life that I have now if it wasn't for that community. So I think it's
Mm-hmm.
just, whether it's church or a group therapy or anything where you're with people who all have the same ultimate goal, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's like a principle. There's a great book called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. It's a
Mm-hmm.
classic book from, I think, from the 30s. And it's not even
Yeah.
about being rich financially per se, it's just having a rich life.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he talks about a lot is he outlines different principles, different fundamental truths. And one of them is like the mastermind principle, right? That's when you get two or more people in a room together that are like, we're going over there. We're going in that direction together and in unique ways, but we're kind of all on the same path here. And there's so
Mm-hmm.
much power in that inertia in community. And that's something that's been lost through the eons of our various civilizations, wherein anthropologically speaking, if you go back, a few thousand years, 10, 15,000 years, in hunter-gatherer tribes, we were 50 or 60 people that lived together our entire life
Mm-hmm.
and traveled around together and went through trials and tribulations. People got sick, people died, babies were born, right? People cheated on each other and got in trouble. And, I'm sure there was all these little micro dramas, just like we see in the collective of our culture now. But
Mm-hmm.
there was a sense of belonging, a sense of connection, and a sense of community that's really missing from modern life. And I think,
Yeah.
organizations like different churches and different groups of people that are working on themselves and there to support one another is such a massive missing link in our ability to cope with the realities of life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think so much like when you talked about church and religion and stuff, I think even in my church, which is an amazing church and is filled with amazing people, I think that there is in religion, it is about, for the most part, the difference between like a spirituality, which I would say I'm more aligned with than religion, is it's like everyone has to, it's the same rule book for everybody, but everyone's different. Everyone is different. Are you telling me that everyone is supposed to be Christian? Everyone from every place who thinks about things differently, who are neurodivergent or neurotypical, who have different autoimmune conditions, different ways that they think about things, different ways that they were grown up, different traumas that they've experienced, that they're all supposed to experience the same thing. I find that interesting. And my dad has a thing that he tells me, which God is a diamond, and people will look at the diamond. They're all put in different places. There's different ways that the light reflects through it. When you look at a diamond, you see colors sometimes, and you maybe see a little yellow or a little blue or a little red. And whatever that thing is, people see that, they take it, and they go, okay, my God is blue. Hey everyone, I want to take a quick moment to shout out my friends at Conviction Co. If you know me, you know I love my hats. And my friends at Conviction Co. have not only made an amazing hat, but hats that stand for something amazing. I'm obsessed with these, and you will be too. Seriously. They're such great quality, and I love them so much. So head over right now to convictionco.com to grab your own hats and stand with me in standing for something you believe in and looking and feeling good while doing it. Use code WAXONWAXOFF at checkout for 10% off. That's WAXONWAXOFF for 10% off at checkout. Trust me, you'll love these hats as much as I do. Use the link below. Let's get back into the episode. They see the blue and they go, my God is blue. And then they live their whole life thinking that thing and they miss the diamond. And it's like, I don't want to live my life or just thinking about that people like just to have the ego to assume that everyone's supposed to fit in that square peg.
That's a great example of that. I like the diamond and the different colors. It reminds me of, I'm sure even younger people will know this, the album Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon. That's like one of the most iconic album covers. And it has, um, a beam of light, like white light going into a triangle, like a crystal, right? Or a
Mm-hmm.
diamond, to your example. And then out the other side of it shoots all of the colors of the rainbow, right? It's a prism. It's the way the visible light spectrum reacts when it's shown through a crystal, creates a prism, kind of like what you see when you see a rainbow in the sky. Those colors are always present in the spectrum of sunlight, but we only see it in certain
Yeah.
conditions, right? And so, yeah, the way I look at that is whatever God is, I still have no idea what it is or who it is. I just know that it
Mm-hmm.
is. When it created the diversity of human beings, it's the thing that gave us all our unique perspective and preferences and the unique mind that we have and the emotional body and all the elements of who we are is infinitely diverse. And so if you have a religious organization or a teaching that becomes too restrictive and dogmatic, it's actually antithetical to how God created us. You know what I mean? It's like we're not all supposed to think the same way. But I think the value in spiritual teachings and in some religions is there are universal truths. They're sort of the laws of the universe. Like when you go out on the highway, there's the laws, codes, and statutes of what to do if you want to safely get from point A to point B, right? You maintain a speed limit, you don't run into the different lanes, you stop at the stop signs, you don't bump into other cars. Regardless of how many different types of cars there are on the highway, if everyone kind of follows the same guidebook or the same laws, everyone's going to get where they're going safely. And I think of the life journey in a very similar way. There are universal truths or laws that are metaphysical. They're outside of the physical realm. And if we learn what they are and how they operate and get better at practicing them in our lives, we have a more fulfilling, rich experience of
Mm-hmm.
life. And to me, the role of religion should be, this is how I would know if I'm in a church or any kind of organization that aligns for me, is it about the teachings themselves and how much can we distill down to what the actual laws or truths are, and we can each do our best to adhere to those laws and help each other and support each other to learn how to do that. But to put any other kind of restrictions on people that are kind of human made invention is ultimately going to be less liberating and more confining. And what we're going for is liberation, right? We want to have a free mind where we're able to think in new ways and be open-minded and malleable and grow and change and evolve. We want to have a healthy expression of our emotions and have a effective way of communicating what we're feeling inside. We want to be able to, have a work life and a home life that is fulfilling. And to me, the way to do all of those things and a physical health and all that, right, is to learn the fundamental universal truths of the universe and to follow them. And if we're not doing that, I'm not interested. you know, it's a great way to kind of vet if a teaching works for me. Is it expansive? Is it helping me to be bigger and more of myself, or is it restrictive and causing me to hold back who and what I
Mm-hmm.
am?
So you talked about psychedelics. I've never done any, but I am fascinated by them. And I just specifically, I'm really big into neuroscience, and the neuroscience behind psilocybin is like insurmountably for the good of humanity. It's amazing. What psychedelics have you tried? Were there some that kind of were maybe you wouldn't do again? Were there some that you definitely recommend to people? What's that whole thing like?
Sure. Well, to answer the first question, I would rephrase that. What psychedelics have I not done? And I can't think of one.
Okay.
Um, no, I'm kind of being a smart ass. Maybe because I took a little mushrooms this morning before our recording. My sense of humor is, a little more activated.
Awesome.
Okay, when I was in high school, 1986, I started to get back into drugs. As I told you before, I started younger, had a 2-year break when I went to this boarding school. And I'm in high school in a little ass town in Colorado, a little town called Basalt. I think we had a couple hundred kids in high school. And so, I'd smoke weed before school all the time and during school and all that. And then started getting into other drugs. And then the first time I used a psychedelic was LSD. And I took it maybe like mid-morning, and it started to hit in my home ec class. And we're playing with Tupperware and, learning how to operate a kitchen. And that became impossible. So I left for the day.
Yeah.
Understandably, for anyone who's ever taken LSD. And thus began adding psychedelics, specifically LSD, or acid, as some people call it, and mushrooms, psychedelic mushrooms, psilocybin mushrooms. When I started using them at 16, I used both of those somewhat regularly for 10 years until I was 26 when I got sober. The difference between what I've been doing for the past few years, I guess since 2017, 18, 19, 20, 22, 5-6 years now, was that when I was experimenting with psychedelics back then, my teens into my 20s, they were just another drug like alcohol, cannabis, cocaine, heroin, crack, crystal meth, all the other drugs that I did, alcohol. I classified them all in the same category as just a way to get wasted and just to either have fun and just be free and liberated and lose my inhibitions and just party, go to concerts, all that kind of thing. I had no idea, even after 10 years, that those substances are in a completely different category than the drugs that I was using to just kind of numb the pain of being in my life experience. But even though I had no idea of the healing potential of those substances, I did on a few occasions have experiences that showed me that there was more to the nature of our reality than I was able to experience in everyday life. One of them being the first or second time I used LSD, I was just at a party, getting drunk. There was a keg. We're listening to rock and roll, smoking cigarettes, doing all the normal things we did as teenage partiers.
Yeah.
I was kind of like we were the punk rock kids in high school. And, there was like 3 of us in the whole high school with dyed hair and earrings and stuff. It's funny, dude. Back in the day, if you were like a heterosexual boy and you I would dye my hair black and tease it out with hairspray and had earrings and all this kind of stuff. And I never got beat up, but you get picked on and called gay and all this kind of stuff. It's just funny to think now you're probably cooler if you have tattoos and dyed hair and earrings if you're a teenager. But back then,
it's weird if you don't have that stuff now.
Yeah, totally. You're like, what are you, a nerd? But back then we were the outcasts. So we're partying and I'm out on the porch and I look up at the sky and I'm really high on acid. And I started looking at the stars and it's difficult to even articulate because it was so profound. I had this understanding and knowing of how vast the universe is and how completely insignificant I am myself, and all of my problems and pain and worries were just so minuscule in comparison to the vast magnitude of the universe. So it was I would say, a micro spiritual experience, right? It was someone, again, I mean, at that point, I never even thought about God my whole life. It just literally never crossed my mind. And I kind of looked up and went, something had to have made this. and something made me. And that was the end of it. And then,
Yeah.
went back and got wasted and did psychedelics at concerts and stuff for many years. Then there was another
Mhm.
experience that's really funny because it took me about 22 years after the fact to even realize what had happened. But on another occasion, a few months before I ended up getting sober in the story I told you before,
Mhm.
one of the things I did for work was deal drugs, as many addicts do. And one of the drugs that I dealt was mushrooms. And so I would buy, 5 pounds at a time, which is enough to get like an entire town high. And so we would just take mushrooms all the time just for fun. I mean, just we're going
Mhm.
out to the bar, take some mushrooms and go get drunk at the bar. It was just like
Mhm.
a normal thing. So one night I did that, and um, me and my buddy, who was the drummer of my band, took a bunch of mushrooms and we're just getting drunk, smoking weed, hanging out, listening to music. And I had what would ostensibly be a nervous breakdown. I just
Hmm.
had a complete meltdown. The mushrooms, again, this I didn't realize for a long time, but the way the mushrooms affected my system was it enabled me to see the reality of what bad shape I was in, and like
Mm.
how bad addiction was uh destroying my life. Like I just when I was trying to take those mushrooms that night to kind of run away from reality, and what they did is the reality of my life hit me like a freight train, and I just
Mhm.
cried. I was sobbing and telling my friend what a loser I am, and I'm an addict, and I gotta do something. I have to change. I don't know how to get out. And anyway, just had this whole meltdown. My poor friend probably had a really bad night.
Yeah.
He's trying to just take some shrooms, get drunk with Luke, and have some fun like we normally do. And I just went completely off the rails.
Yeah.
So, in all of those years of kind of trying to use those substances to numb my pain, I did have those two experiences wherein I saw beyond my reality and was able to see greater truths.
Mhm.
Fast forward 22 years later, I'm sober as a judge. I mean, never smoked weed, had a beer, anything in 22 years, just stone cold sober.
Mhm.
And to make a longer story short, I started to meet people who were working with ayahuasca, which contains something called DMT, dimethyltryptamine.
Mhm.
And there are a few things on the planet that contain DMT. And one of the plants that they make this ayahuasca, it's a tea essentially, kind of a brew, an extract of different herbs. And one of the herbs has DMT, and that's what gives you the psychoactive effect. And I started hearing these stories of people who were, these aren't druggy people, these aren't addict people, these are people that are into spirituality, meditation, they're happy, healthy people that are using ayahuasca in a ceremonial, intentional way to heal emotional trauma, to open their creativity. The neuroscience behind it, I started to become aware of some of that. And I knew that even though I had been sober for all of those years and had been, doing all kinds of therapy and meditating and yoga and all these things, there were still areas of my life in which I was stuck. There were just
Hmm.
things from my childhood that I couldn't get to heal on a deep enough level. So I was
Mhm.
having these negative patterns still in my life. So I was invited to go to an ayahuasca ceremony in Costa Rica, which is a week-long retreat. And I sat on it for a few months, and I thought, that sounds like it could really be helpful to me, but I'm sober, and that doesn't really go with being sober because I
Yeah.
still viewed psychedelics in the way that I used to, as they're just another drug.
Mhm.
And I was afraid it might, kind of awaken the beast within me, and maybe I'd start smoking weed or drinking or doing cocaine or whatever. So I was really afraid of using psychedelics. But
Yeah.
eventually, I think I had enough trust in myself and self-awareness that, because the idea persisted that this ayahuasca, whatever the hell it was, I'd never taken it before. I didn't really even know what it was. I just felt like it could help me for some reason. It was just an intuitive
Mhm.
feeling. So anyway, I go to Costa Rica, have that experience. It was absolutely earth shattering and beautiful and healing and transformative. And I left there a completely different person.
Yeah.
And thus began what has been an incredible journey over the past many years of very systematically, cautiously, intentionally, only when I feel a very strong, legitimate pull that the reason that I'm going to sit with the medicine is going to be beneficial to my life, and I'm doing it for the right reasons. And everyone has their own right reasons. For me, the right reasons are, am I doing it to go deeper within myself and find greater levels of truth? Are there things that I'm stuck on that I want to work on, that I want to heal, etc.? So since that first trip to drink ayahuasca, I've sat with ayahuasca a number of times. Also worked with mushrooms, and sometimes mushrooms in conjunction with MDMA, which some facilitators use synergistically. I've also worked with something called 5-MeO-DMT, which is only present in one place on the planet, and that's in the venom of a toad called the Sonoran desert toad, otherwise known as Bufo alvarius. I think it's alvarius. Is that it? Yeah, Bufo alvarius. I just call it Bufo. So interesting. This toad only exists on one place on planet Earth, and it's in the southwestern desert between the southwest United States and the Sonoran Desert in Mexico. This one little stretch of land. These toads live there, and some kook at some point figured out that you could agitate them, and their skin excretes this toxin to keep predators away. If a coyote tries to eat them, it'll get sick and maybe kill it. So it's their defense mechanism. People have learned how to extract and harvest that excretion, dry it out, and smoke it. And that venom contains a number of different alkaloids and peptides and stuff, but the main ingredient is 5-MeO-DMT. So there's that. And then there's a cactus called the San Pedro cactus that's been used ceremonially to produce a medicine called wachuma. The active ingredient there is what's it called? The same thing in peyote. Oh my God, it's slipping my mind right at the moment. It's hilarious.
It's all good.
And the other one is peyote, which has historically been a big part of the Native American cultures and churches and things like that. A holy sacrament. And now I'm stuck on that word. What is that damn word? It's so funny. Can't believe I just forgot that. Too many drugs in my life, kids. That's all I can say. You lose it sometimes. Mescaline. There we go.
Okay.
Mescaline. So San Pedro and peyote are different cacti, but they each contain the active ingredient mescaline. And so those are the main psychedelics or plant medicines that I've worked with in the past few years. And the difference between the way I used to use psychedelics and all other drugs, as I said, is I categorize them all as the same thing. But what I've learned, especially as someone who is sober, or at least my own version of it, I'm sober from the drugs and alcohol that were problematic for me and have addictive potential, is that nowhere on record that I'm aware of has anyone ever become, in a classical sense, addicted to any psychedelic. In my experience, I literally couldn't become addicted to any of them if I tried, even if I wanted to. And I was like, oh, I'm going to become addicted to mushrooms. I'll take them every day. Like, the experiences are so intense and so profound, so powerful, so just paradigm shifting that I find myself saying no or passing on those experiences 99.999% of the time that they're presented, because I only want to work with them when I have a really good reason. And because those experiences can be so intense and they can really just change your reality so radically, I'm kind of afraid of them. And it's a healthy fear, right? It's sort of like, you might like rock climbing, right? But you have your limits as a rock climber. I'm kind of tired today. That rock face is a little too dangerous, so I'm not going to do it today, or maybe not even too often. It's like you take someone who climbs Everest. They don't go do it every weekend, right? They maybe do it once in their life and they're like, okay, that was scary, but I grew a lot as a person from overcoming that challenge. But
Yeah.
it's not something I need to do again or every day or anything like that. So
Yeah.
to the last part of your question, what would I recommend for people? I would never say that I recommend that anyone uses psychedelics because it's such an individual experience,
Mm-hmm.
and it's one that can be psychologically and physically dangerous if it's not done with the utmost care and
Yes.
supervision. And it's something like any skill that it's an acquired skill. It's like a
Mm-hmm.
martial art, learning how to navigate the realms of quantum unified field and being in this kind of interdimensional space. It's something that requires some skill that is usually skill that is held by a shaman, a facilitator, a therapist, someone who knows those layers of reality
Mm-hmm.
intimately and knows how to navigate them for themselves through their experience and their training,
Mm-hmm.
and is able to take you as the the mentee or the person being facilitated and help guide you safely through those realms. Because
Mm-hmm.
in those realms of reality, and for anyone that hasn't worked with psychedelics, you'll be like, what the hell is he talking about? For anyone that has, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about.
Uh-huh.
We exist in a realm that is limited to our bodily perception, right? It's based on our senses. And our senses are only able to perceive a narrow spectrum of visible light. But science has proven that there's a multitude of reality in other dimensions outside of this narrow bandwidth of visible light. And so one of the things that psychedelics do is open up our awareness and perception of a much wider bandwidth of reality. And
Mm-hmm.
so you can think of it as in our normal waking state as we are right now, because I only took a microdose of psilocybin this morning. I'm very much still here in the 3D with you.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to have this conversation. I'd probably be laughing the whole time or just completely insane or actually more sane. So right now, you and I are, and everyone listening and watching, unless they're on psychedelics or having some profound spiritual experience, we're tuned into channel 3 on the TV, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean that channel 1 through 10,000 don't also exist simultaneously. It's just
Mm-hmm.
the way God and nature has designed us to function in a body as a human being is we're only really able to handle this one channel at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why it can be so dangerous to open up all of those other channels if you're not skilled and experienced in those realms, and especially if you don't have someone else holding space for you that understands those realms. So if things start to
Mm-hmm.
go a little off the rails and you get scared, or you're having emotions that are difficult to process, or you're seeing things that might be troubling that you start to think are real, I mean hallucinations and all this kind of stuff, it's really, really important, more so than like recommending them for people. It's for people that do feel in earnest a curiosity or a call, like I did with ayahuasca at 22 years sober. It's like my intellectually, it made no sense. I'm like, no, Luke, are you crazy? Why are you even thinking about this? You can't do that.
Yeah.
You do not do drugs. That is a drug.
Yeah.
But there was an intuitive feeling in my innermost being, an intuition that's like, no, I know this makes no sense, but I think I'm supposed to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone listening has that feeling, like, yeah, like, you maybe someday you're like, wow, I'm looking at the neuroscience of this and this really makes sense. Like there's something viable here. Shit, I think I'm meant to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no right or wrong reason, right? I mean, when I was doing psychedelics to try and escape my problems, there was nothing wrong with that. It was just a different intention. And it,
Mm-hmm.
based on the
Yeah.
intention is the result you're going to get. The result I had was some pretty traumatic and dangerous situations.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would recommend more than people do it or not do it is ask yourself why you want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Next question would be, why now in my life do I want to do it? Why does it have to be this weekend? Could it be next year? Could it be next weekend? Like,
Mm-hmm.
why now? With whom? Have I thoroughly researched the people or person that's going to be guiding me? Are they trustworthy? Do they have integrity? Do I know people that have had that experience with them that felt safe and were safe?
Mm-hmm.
Does this person have a good reputation? It's like other than maybe picking a romantic partner, there might be no other better decision you ever make than putting your trust over to the person that is going to guide you in a psychedelic experience. I mean, it's that important
Yeah.
that they are trustworthy and safe, and that you can verify that with a third party, or ideally a few third party individuals that can say, oh
Yeah.
yeah, I had a beautiful experience with them. Everything was on the up and up. And I
Yeah.
think most people in this space are people of integrity and all of that. But there are also many people in the psychedelic scene, of course, like all areas of human life, that are not in integrity and are malevolent people,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately. So that's really important. And then in addition to the why now, with whom, is the where.
Mm-hmm.
The environment that you're in these experiences is really, really important, because you're opening up your sensitivities in a way that is just indescribable. The as I said, the portals that are being opened up, you're opening up your perception of such a wide bandwidth of reality through all these different dimensions. You don't want to be in a dirty mobile home with Slayer playing on the radio, taking some acid. You know what I'm saying? Which I've done. You want to be in an environment where there's a sense of the sacred, where there's reverence, where there's beautiful
Mm-hmm.
music, where you feel very physically safe and you understand your surroundings and boundaries physically of where you're going to be lying or sitting, who's going to be there, how many other people, who are those people, how
Mm-hmm.
long are we going to be there, can I stay there for a while afterward? Is there someone on staff that has CPR training should anything go awry? I mean, you could
Mm-hmm.
get up to go to the bathroom and hit your head. And
Yeah.
I mean, all kinds of crazy things can happen. So safety, emotionally, mentally, and physical safety are of the utmost importance. And that has a lot to do with the people that you're sitting with, where you're doing it. My preference personally is to go away from my life, to be nowhere near my phone, nowhere near my computer, not near any relationships or stress or work that could be remotely triggering in any way. So
Mm-hmm.
if I'm going to go sit with, especially one of the more powerful medicines like ayahuasca, I mean, I'm going away for the whole weekend, staying a couple days after, because the lessons that one learns in those experiences, the truths that are revealed by your higher self, by God, maybe by the teachings that are being shared by the facilitators, those experiences in and of themselves are life-changing, because you have insights you're able to know things that you didn't know you knew,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like imagine when you pray and you're kind of like, I don't know, I'm praying to God. I think I believe in God, but I don't really know. I'm not really getting answers. When I talk to God, it's not like God talks to me. It's just
Mm-hmm.
my prayers are answered in a very ambiguous and general way in my life. I start to see synchronicities and I think, oh yeah, wow, I was really struggling with this thing and I prayed to God and now it seems to be better. So it must have worked. Well, in plant
Mm-hmm.
medicines, it's like you're hearing the voice of your higher self and the voice of your God going, do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. And
Mm-hmm.
so because the instructions are so explicit and the clarity sometimes is just so razor sharp, to your reference of the diamond, I've had the experience many times where I just go, wow, this is like diamond clarity, diamond sharpness.
Mm-hmm.
So there are some teachings and transformation that take place during the experience, but more than anything, it's about what one does with it afterward. And that's what they call
Yeah.
integration, right? Because psychedelic experiences blow your psyche into a million pieces. Your ego structure, your persona, what makes you who you are, who you think you are, the way you view yourself, the person you see when you look in the mirror, all of that just goes, it's just like a nuclear
Yeah.
explosion. So you truly become disintegrated. And so after the experience is the most important part, because that's when you integrate, you become whole again. You know,
Mm-hmm.
integrity is like wholeness, completeness, it's soundness, it's sturdiness, it's where your strength is, and in your integrity. So when your integrity is disrupted in such a profound and usually beautiful, sometimes scary way, it's so important to have time and space, and also the help of facilitation and someone who's trained to help you put yourself back together in a new and hopefully more healed way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely will at least be doing microdosing in the future, because I just it's crazy that these things that are so beneficial, and I might get a little tinfoil hatty here, these things that solve
I
all.
have my tinfoil hat right there on the desk. I
Yeah,
just
yeah,
didn't wear it for the video.
yeah. It's uh like big pharma wants people to be, it's profitable to have people who have mental illnesses, who struggle with these things, to have them on something that will keep them forever on the thing, therefore forever buying the thing, therefore forever giving them money, versus this thing. I have never experienced it myself, but like I've seen people who do ayahuasca, who do psilocybin, who their lives are forever changed. They get to like magnify some of these traumas that they've dealt with and look at them and heal from them. PTSD healed in like 1 or 2 or 3 sessions. Like if that's something that can happen in 3 sessions, that's not profitable whatsoever. That's not a good business model.
Yeah,
But
it's
that's the
true.
right model. That's the God model. And that's what I think
Yeah,
about, is like there are opportunities even as a podcaster, like, and I think business owners should, if they're listening, they should hear this, is that if there is an option to give someone a gift of healing, but it's not super profitable, just do it. Just go, just do that, because you're being, that's the God through you going into other people's lives. And that's like, if people could do that and just not be focused on themselves, because that's a self-centered behavior. If you can just really think about how can you make an impact, and it'll just, yeah, anyway.
yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, this is the future, I think, of our
100%.
next step forward in terms of healing is moving into systems and modes of healing that aren't dependent on the pharmaceutical industrial complex.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, listen, if I got bit by a, Komodo dragon, give me some antibiotics. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not an idiot.
No, 100%.
If I fall off the roof and, break my shoulder, like give me some opiates. I have no problem with pharmaceuticals. It's just to your point of pharmaceuticals are not meant to solve the root problem. And so if you're looking at psychiatric medication, which I tried, I can speak from experience, that was a masking of symptoms without addressing the root problems, which for me was PTSD from the trauma I experienced as
Mm-hmm.
a kid. Sexual abuse is what
Mm.
well, a lot of different traumas, but that would have been the big one,
Yeah.
on a number of occasions. And so
Mm-hmm.
I could take antidepressants, and maybe that might be beneficial if I'm about to kill myself. Antidepressants are a step up from dying,
Mm-hmm.
but they weren't something that would allow me the full expression of life, right? It was just kind of numbed me out and put me back to sleep, versus healing that PTSD with ayahuasca, which very much happened for me. Then it's a one-time thing, and therefore no one's going to make money from it, because now I
Mm-hmm.
don't have the underlying root cause of that anymore. So I'm not going to pay for symptom relief because I don't have the symptoms anymore, because we went after the root cause.
Yeah.
And in terms of like the monetary incentive, 3.5 grams of psilocybin mushrooms is about, the effective dose for most people. That's going to take you where you want to go. Anything over that is, quite powerful. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
think there's probably anyone on earth that would take, say, 3.5 to 5 grams of mushrooms and not have it change their life in a really meaningful way.
Mm-hmm.
Mushrooms, since I was selling them in the 90s, I'm pretty sure they're about the same price, are about $10 a gram.
Mm-hmm.
So about $35. Anyone that can get a hold of mushrooms, again, in the right context, and all the stuff that I said earlier applies. I'm
Yes.
not just saying go buy a bag of mushrooms at the gas station and, spend the day in Target. But think about that. $35 worth of medicine can change your entire life, where you never have to take that medicine ever again,
Yeah.
right? So the financial incentive is certainly not there. And that's an interesting thing that we're going to observe in the coming years as psychedelics, thankfully, are becoming more mainstream and getting scientific validation. Because they're so inexpensive to produce and they can't be patented, it'll be interesting to see how they fit into the pharmaceutical
Mm-hmm.
industrial model, because there's really no money to be made unless you make a novel psychedelic that you can patent, and now it's a prescription medication. But all
Mm-hmm.
of the ones that I spoke to earlier, with which I have experience, are all, I mean, some of them are free. You can grow your own mushrooms in your closet quite easily. There's the plant San Pedro that I mentioned, the
Mm-hmm.
cactus. You can buy that at Home Depot, and it's totally legal, but it becomes illegal when you process it and eat it. Then it's a drug.
Yeah.
But it's free. We have a bunch growing in our yard. I could go chop one down right now, call you back in 3 hours, and I will be completely tripping balls. So it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
there's not a lot of money to be made in the realm of
Mm-hmm.
psychedelics, but there's so much healing potential, as you're now learning, studying neuroscience. And another thing I'll add too that's interesting is, in many indigenous cultures, plant medicines are baked into their rites of passage for young teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
Just like a hunting trip or something like that would be, right? Spending time in a vision quest, going and sitting in a teepee for 4 days with no food and just water and yourself, these kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that Western culture is really missing, amongst many things we're listening of, just intact family units, strong fathers in the homes, things like that, which you're so lucky you have that, the
Mm-hmm.
strong, conscious
100%.
dad that you have. You're so blessed. You must have good karma. But most kids don't, I would say. And one of the things we're missing that's so important is a rite of passage. And it's interesting to observe that in many indigenous cultures throughout history, plant medicines in one form or another have been a large part of that rite of passage. It's like, okay, you're moving into womanhood or moving into manhood. You're now ready to have a greater and deeper experience of reality. And I think a lot of our stunted emotional maturity and just ability to be sovereign, responsible people has to do with our lack of experience in those spiritual
Mm-hmm.
realms, of having those peak spiritual experiences, that
Mm-hmm.
psychedelics so reliably produce, that's kind of missing, right?
Yeah.
And going back to, the experience I had in my early 20s, where I didn't even realize that meltdown I had on mushrooms was the impetus for me a few months later going, I'm done, and checking myself into rehab.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't make that connection at the time, but it was a rite of passage. It was like I was faced with myself in such a terrifying and starkly real way that I couldn't evade the responsibility of changing my life anymore. It was truly a rite of passage.
Yeah. Yeah. I Yeah, and I would love to see, because there's not a lot of studies on younger people doing it before their brain is fully developed. Usually the rule is kind of wait till, for guys if you're 25, for girls if you're 23. Wait until your brain is fully developed, because and I would honestly like to see how that affects, like do a study on how before 25 it affects brain development. And maybe it's not a stunting, maybe it's this crazy, amazing growth that happens like in these developmental years of like your brain is different. You have longevity once you're older. I mean, why are we not doing these studies? That's a wonderful question.
Yeah.
And honestly, maybe that's something I'll do in the future. Who knows? But
Yeah, it is interesting. Some of the various shaman that I've worked with in the realm of plant medicines, specifically Shipibo people from Peru that work a lot with ayahuasca and with Wachuma or San Pedro,
mhm,
and even some Native American and Mexican tribes that work with peyote or psilocybin, have explained to me that, and they're outside of the Western paradigm of science and research, unfortunately, right? I mean, fortunately for them,
yeah,
probably.
yeah,
They're still living, living in the jungle, etc. But they've explained to me that plant medicines in a ceremonial, sacred context are part of their children's lives,
mhm,
and an integral part of their development. And because they're given the opportunity to heal any traumas that they've accumulated during their lives, that they are much more mature, wise, happy, and so on. So it's interesting to think about our brains not fully developing until we're in our early to mid 20s, as you described. It is unfortunate that we don't have data on people for whom plant medicines have been part of their culture since they
mhm,
were, presumably a young teenager, and to
yeah,
see how that has affected them. I would guess, if I had to put money on it, that it's affected them more positively than negatively.
100%.
But if you take a case like mine in my childhood, I know for sure that I did a lot of damage to myself, not from psychedelics before I was 26, but from all of the other drugs that I was
Mhm,
using as a young kid. And
yeah,
it's unfortunate. Sometimes I think like, wow, I've made a pretty good life for myself, and I'm a pretty bright guy. I'm smart enough to kind of be successful in the world in different ways. But
mhm,
sometimes I think, man, imagine what I would have accomplished had I not fried my brain with doing so many drugs when it was still developing. I
yeah,
really stunted my growth emotionally and mentally, and probably countless other ways about which I'm unaware even. So I think there is something to be said for not altering your brain chemistry dramatically until your brain is fully baked. But there's also something to be said from the wisdom of antiquity from indigenous cultures that have, in a very intentional and specific way, at various intervals, used plant medicines and psychedelics for healing and expansion.
mhm. Yeah, and even to think like for younger people using this thing that could possibly mess with their brain chemistry, like look at Adderall. Adderall is, I mean, pretty much like a legal
Yeah,
amphetamine. Yeah. So it's like, and we're giving
yeah,
that to, I mean, I know my uncle when he was like 11 or something, started on Adderall and he had to get off of that. And that process was terrible for him. And that's just what's up. Like, that's a solution to a common, I guess you could say ADHD is like a mental health. I have ADHD and I've never taken Adderall and I live in harmony with it. And I think there are ways that you can find that. Maybe psychedelics would help. Maybe they wouldn't. I assume that they would based on how the research shows. Um, yeah, I just, this whole conversation is fascinating along psychedelics. Yeah.
What age are you now, Solomon?
I'm 17.
Cool.
Yeah.
Man, I'm so stoked for you, dude. It's so fun to see people your age this awake. It's amazing. It's like so fun. I
Yeah,
love it.
it's I think it's mainly honestly because of my dad and seeing him just everything that he does. He's my hero, like for real. I
Yeah,
he's my best friend and my hero, and he has really anything that's good about me is maybe a little bit of nature, but it's a lot of nurture. It's a lot of my mom and my dad pouring into me, and I'm lucky. And this is my passion is just getting to share these things because I feel like I am a couple steps ahead of people my age. I want to level up my generation. I would love for Gen Z to be the generation that changes the world and makes everything decentralized, and we all get to like live in this harmony where we focus on the similarities and not the differences, because there will always be
yeah,
differences. But just the fact that we are both human beings is it's just that's what you can focus on, and that's the similarities that we have. We're all human. You're different than me. You've had a different upbringing than me, but I can sit with you here for however long we've been talking now, and we can have the most amazing conversation. I was born on the East Coast, you were born on the West Coast. It's like just all this different thing. Okay, so you are into biohacking. How did you get into biohacking? And maybe you don't even like the term biohacking. Honestly, I get sick of it sometimes because I just hear it so much.
I've been trying to come up with a better word for taking care of your body for many years, and I can't come up with a better one. At least not one that's that catchy, or that people know what you're talking about. I would think of it more bioharmonizing or biohealing. And but unfortunately, when people see what I do in my personal life and things I promote and talk about on my podcast and so on, they say, "Oh, Luke, you're that biohacker guy," and I always kind of cringe. I'm like, no, I don't view the body in a mechanistic, reductionist, like, what's the word, dominionistic approach. Like, I'm going to tell my body what it's going to do. I'm going to control my body. To me, the body is its own intelligent, living being that is almost apart from me, right? Because I believe and have experienced when I leave my body, there's still a point of awareness that is me, right? So even though my spirit is in my body, I don't feel like I technically am the body.
No,
so if
I know
the
what you mean.
body's alive and my spirit is alive and we're kind of working together in partnership, then it's not something that can be hacked or that I would even want to hack. It's more like I have a relationship with the body and a communication with the body, and we're there to help and support one another and serve one another, right? Because the body needs me to give it certain inputs and help it to avoid things that are deleterious to its well-being. And the body provides my soul a vehicle with which I can travel in the material plane and do what I'm supposed to do here. So it's kind of more like a friend than it is a computer to me. And I don't try to hack my friends. I try to love my friends and understand my friends and give them what they need and allow them to give me what I need.
Yeah.
So that's my kind of approach to it, which has evolved. I think I used to think in more of a domineering sense, like, I'm going to get my body optimized. And it's like, man, the body just wants you to help it avoid things that hurts it, and it wants you to give it things it needs to be vital and to keep healing and regenerating. So my approach to what is called biohacking is multifaceted, but ultimately really simple. I believe if you could boil down everything that makes a human being die prematurely, get chronic illness, fatal illness, any problems we have with the body, can be, leaving aside the emotional and spiritual part, which is huge. So I'm not discounting that, but it's a whole other podcast to go into that. But just speaking in the gross physical material context, the only thing wrong with us is that we have domesticated ourselves and we live like zoo animals when we're actually meant to live like wild animals. If you take a lion off the savannah as a cub and cut it off from natural sunlight, biocompatible food, put it under the stress of EMF or electromagnetic frequencies, cell towers next to the zoo, Wi-Fi all over the zoo, everyone has a cell phone in the zoo, give it blue light, a very narrow, unnatural, non-native spectrum of light, turn the lights on at night when it's not supposed to be light,
Yeah.
give it water full of fluoride and all of the other chemicals present in water, that lion will develop chronic, if not fatal diseases that lions in nature do not get. So we'll look at the kibble, dry kind of cat food that they're feeding the lion and go, it's the food. We got to give it, raw, living, rats or whatever lions eat, right? Throw a gazelle in the cage.
Mm-hmm.
And we think it's just the food, but it's a combination of circadian mismatch lighting, it's the EMF, it's the water, it's the entire environment, it's the lack of physical movement, what we might call exercise. I hate exercising, so I don't call it that. I just like to call it movement. Like lions are meant to run hundreds of miles probably per
Mm-hmm.
day, right? They're just, all they do is move.
Mm-hmm.
So we lock ourselves in square boxes like this room, all right angles. Right angles don't exist in nature. We see sunlight through windows, which cuts out a large spectrum of the light.
Yeah.
These windows here in Texas cut out the infrared light for energy conservation. They cut out, I forget if it's the UVA or UVB, but it filters out the light and creates a non-native kind of narrow spectrum of blue light anytime you're behind glass. We don't experience extreme heat and extreme cold unless we take saunas and ice baths. So we live at 68 degrees. That doesn't happen in nature. We don't move. We sit on our couch. Then we get in the car. We sit in the car. Then we go somewhere. We sit down there. We get back in the car and sit down. We come home. We sit on the couch again. And then we come sit at our desk. We got a Wi-Fi router under the desk, maybe in the wall behind our bedroom. There's 75 cell towers, within a mile if you live in a city. Everything about the way we live in our domesticated indoor life makes the body break down and get
Mm-hmm.
sick. So my
Yeah.
approach to biohacking is, what are the things missing in my diet that the body needs and wants? How can I recreate water that is like water from a Rocky Mountain spring? How can I make the lighting inside my house match the lighting outside of my house in terms of the color spectrum and the brightness and the time of day that I'm seeing light or not seeing light?
Mm-hmm.
And how can I move my body in a way that's more alignment with how human beings have evolved to move in terms of the frequency of movement and the type of movement? Am I lifting heavy things? Am I stretching? Am I being mobile? And am I moving the body in and out of different ranges of motion? Or am I just sitting in a chair all day? If I'm sitting in a chair for a few hours, how often do I get up and twist around and move around and hang on some monkey bars or hang
Mm-hmm.
upside down or, swing on a tree or swing a kettlebell or whatever it is, jump on the trampoline?
Yeah.
So my approach to biohacking is giving the body what it needs, protecting the body from what doesn't serve it, such as blue light, EMF, toxins, seed oils, whatever, and then using different technologies like an ice bath, an infrared sauna, PEMF devices, ozone machines, hyperbaric oxygen chambers, laser therapy, which is just light,
Mm-hmm.
all of this kind of stuff. Hydrogen. I got my hydrogen inhaler right here. My camera went blurry for some reason. There we go. Is how can I give my body the inputs from nature that it's missing from living in an indoor life? And of course,
Mm-hmm.
getting out in nature as much as humanly possible. I mean, I'm out in the yard all the time, just naked, laying in the sun. I think the sun is just the ultimate healing energy in the universe. Of
Yeah.
course, you don't want to get sunburned, but
Yeah.
if you learn how to work with the energies of the sun, you can be out in the sun. Even fair-skinned people I've trained can be out in the sun and they don't get sunburn. It's a whole other protocol. Sun gazing, looking at the sunset, looking at the sunrise. So to me,
So
biohacking
important.
is biohealing, bioharmonizing. It's getting back in touch with the supportive energies that exist in the world, on the
Mm-hmm.
planet, in the cosmos. Magnetism, grounding, earthing. I'm got my bare feet right now on a grounding mat. All the EMF around my desk is all shielded, so I'm not exposed to any electric field. So I try to make the indoor experience of my life where I live and where I work the same as being outside as much as possible. And that's when it gets into kind of the techie side of biohacking, is like,
Mm-hmm.
wow, I'm getting rid of the blue lights, putting in red light bulbs, doing all this kind of stuff. Um, but it's not to try to hack the body. It's actually to be in harmony with the body and be in communication with it, in terms of really feeling and asking the body, what do you need that you're not getting? And what are you getting that you don't need?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's so many things that I want to. You give me like 1,000 different lanes we could go down, but when you talk about the EMFs, so first of all, can you just do like a quick explanation of what an EMF is for some of my listeners who probably won't know
Yeah,
what that is?
electromagnetic frequencies or electromagnetic fields. So inside your home, for example, like in this office, there's lights in the ceiling and there's a light switch over there. There's a fan up there. There's outlets on all the walls where I can plug things in, right? Well, if you take the drywall off these walls, what you'll find is a bunch of plastic shielded metal wires that carry the electricity to things I want to plug in and to be able to turn the lights on.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that electricity in the United States runs on a frequency of 60 hertz. 60 hertz has been over and over again determined to be harmful to humans when you're exposed to it. It's not natural. 60 hertz in isolation doesn't exist anywhere in nature. Going back to like nature has the answers, right? So
Yeah.
nowhere on the planet can you sit anywhere and be exposed to just 60 hertz of electricity. It doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
I love that I can turn the lights on. I love that we can be on a computer right now. It has its
100%.
benefits, but EMF in that regard is an electric field. And so from about 6 feet into the interior of a room on all sides where there's wiring in those walls, the body is constantly exposed to this 60 hertz electric field. If you're, sitting next to a lamp, the wire goes up into that lamp where you turn the switch. That lamp is emitting an electric field. That's one type of EMF. There are many types of EMF. So if you're sleeping with your bed against the wall and there's two outlets behind your wall, you're being radiated by electricity all night.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one type. Another type of EMF would be a magnetic field, and magnetic fields are sometimes present inside your house coming off the walls because of errors in the wiring. The electrician didn't follow code, and therefore
Hmm.
your wiring isn't grounded right, and you'll be experiencing a magnetic field. Or things like your refrigerator, anything with a motor. The pool equipment behind this wall makes a crazy magnetic field that goes through the wall into our living room. Then you have what's called RF or radio frequencies. This is a smart meter on the side of your house, your cell phone, anything with Bluetooth, your Wi-Fi router, cell towers, FM radio waves going through the air, radar from airports, um, the radar in your car that tells you you're about to hit something, the little bumper radar.
Mm-hmm.
Military bases have all kinds of RF or radio frequencies coming off them. Radio frequencies are widely understood to be the most harmful
Okay.
and cause the most severe interference biologically. And so there's a number of different things that radio frequencies do that are harmful to the body. One of which being interfering with the natural electric voltage of the body and the way cells open and close to allow different minerals like calcium and magnesium to get in and out. So your cells have an electrical polarity that allows them to open up to let nutrients in and then open up again to let toxins out. One of the things that chronic EMF exposure does is it interferes with that process.
Hmm.
So there's electric fields, magnetic fields, and radio frequencies. Magnetic. Yeah, I think I covered them all. So
Yeah.
essentially, just to boil it down, in nature, EMF exists. The sun is radiation, right? That's what it is,
Yeah.
right? That's why you get sunburned if you go out in the sun too long and
Mm-hmm.
you're fair skinned and you haven't
Yeah.
worked up your solar callus. There's also a magnetic field that comes off the earth. So magnetism, electricity in the air, right? I mean, you see lightning. There's nothing wrong with electricity. There's nothing wrong with radiation. There's nothing wrong with magnetic fields. It's just in nature, they're all in balance and they are biocompatible with the human body.
Mm-hmm.
When we produced electricity and all of the technology that we've become so dependent upon, we've created distorted versions of those different frequencies that exist in nature. And we've isolated the different frequencies in ways that the body does not know how to recognize and process. And we've also increased the strength of those frequencies to levels that are tens of thousands times higher than would ever exist in nature.
Mm-hmm.
So EMF to me is a bigger problem than junk food.
Yeah.
I mean, if you put it this way, if you told me you could live in a world where there's no EMF, or you have to live in a world where all there is to eat is fast food, I would take the fast food world with no EMF, put it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like eating Doritos 24/7. You can't constantly ingest bad foods. You can constantly ingest these bad electromagnetic fields and be surrounded by them.
Yeah.
So
And
you talked about,
before I forget,
yeah.
for folks listening that want to learn more about EMFs, and I mean, it's gotten so bad now. We have 5G,
Mm-hmm.
which stands for fifth generation. When I got my first cell phone in, I don't know, maybe 1997, 98, something like that, you would experience like call drops, right? I remember I'd go through certain neighborhoods in LA and my phone would die for like 2 blocks. And that was
Mm-hmm.
like 1G, right? But other than that, it worked just fine.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're up to 5G, which are even more powerful and more dangerous frequencies, especially in city centers, like in dense population centers. Any downtown city in the world now is full of 5G. And my phone doesn't really work any better than it ever did. So it's got to tell you something about, put on the tinfoil hat again here for a moment, why the increase in all of these cell towers, the power of the cell towers, the dangerous frequencies that the cell towers are using, when they could use frequencies that are actually good for you, but they just choose
Mm-hmm.
not to. It's not for faster downloads, put it that way, which is what the marketing will tell you. I was at the T-Mobile store yesterday, and they're like, faster downloads, 5G. I'm like, no, not really. I'm in the store. My phone works the same as it's always worked.
Yeah.
But the issue is that the cell towers are really the biggest problem, and also your cell phone and having Wi-Fi in the home and smart technology. So I'm going to give your listeners a really awesome and generous gift. I created an EMF course that is about 5.5 hours of high quality video content that explains every detail about EMF that I just kind of gave an overview of, but also every practical solution, things like how to shield your Wi-Fi router, or how to, set it on a timer and turn it off on night, how to protect yourself when you're using your laptop or your cell phone, and all the things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a completely free course. There's no charge. There's no catch at all. You can go to lukestorey.com/EMF masterclass and just put in your name and email, and you get lifetime access to the entire course. And
Yep.
I did that as kind of a service to humanity. And
Yeah.
I was inspired to do that because I was living unknowingly directly under 2 massive cell towers for 3 years when I lived in LA, and they were hidden. And I was
Mm-hmm.
well aware of the dangers of cell towers, but I couldn't see them because they were behind a kind of a decorative wall on the building next to my apartment. And I got really, really sick for 3 years. I started having to wear glasses. I got chronic tinnitus. I had brain fog to where sometimes I could barely drive a car. I was like so out of it, and I couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. I did all this functional medicine testing and detox protocols and went to every doctor I could, and no one could figure out what was wrong with me. And eventually I discovered the cell towers, and I moved.
Yeah.
And over the years since then, all those symptoms have started to subside as I've really put a lot of energy into eliminating the EMF from my life. And that course, again, lukestorey.com/EMF masterclass. You can put a link in your show notes if you want.
Yep. It'll be
Those
down
are
there.
all the things I've learned in 20 years of research on how to live in the world and use your phone and use your computer and stay connected, but really minimize
Yeah.
the dangers involved. So I'm really, really passionate about educating people about EMF
Uh-huh.
because it's invisible. People don't understand how dangerous it is. Like if you put, like you said, some Doritos and a pack of cigarettes in front of someone, they're like, oh, that's bad for you. And they take it, and there's a direct correlation between I ate this thing or drank this thing and now I don't feel well.
Mm-hmm.
But because EMF fields are invisible, we don't know that that's what's making us sick
Mm-hmm.
until you start learning how to do testing with different meters in your home, and you start to see like, wow, I basically live inside a giant microwave oven.
Yeah, and
Um,
I even listened to a podcast episode. They were talking about Teslas and how bad Teslas are for people. Because I mean, people might think. I mean, you talked about the radars and stuff on your car, like when you're trying to oh, brake, like that kind of stuff affects you. But Teslas, I've heard, are just like a microwave for people.
yeah, they unfortunately all modern cars that are run on computer chips and that have, like Apple CarPlay, for example, where there's a Wi-Fi router right in your car, right next to
Hmm.
your head, and you have the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and your phone in the car, and those are all bouncing around in the car, and then you have cell towers from every direction coming into your car to connect with those things. So every modern car is really bad. Teslas are a little more problematic because they run on obviously electricity, and the battery is right underneath the seats. So
Hmm.
they're pretty rough. But honestly, people give Teslas a lot of crap, and they're not that much worse than I have a BMW and my wife has a Tesla, and they're about the same, to be honest. They're both really
Okay.
high EMF. So one of the things I do in my car is I manually have to go into the controls and turn off the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. And then I plug my phone into the USB cable, and that's what I use to like listen to podcasts and music and stuff.
Okay.
And then the only time I really turn my phone on and turn on the Apple CarPlay in the car is if I have to use my GPS, like use
Okay.
Waze or something to get
Yeah.
somewhere. But
Interesting.
the longer I live, I moved to Texas 3 years ago. The longer I live here, the better I find my way around, so I don't have to use the GPS that often.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. I saw this is something that stuck out to me when I first emailed you. At the bottom of your email, it said sent from a blue light and EMF protected device. Do you have a different phone? What? How do you make your phone EMF and blue light protected? Because I know you touched on the light. It's so important for us to avoid blue light because it's not it's not good for us whatsoever. And I think a lot of people my age who listen are listening to this on their phone, and they're probably freaking out, being
Yes.
like, "My phone is killing me. What the heck is going on? What do I do?"
Yeah.
So how do you avoid that?
I try to avoid using fear tactics, but here's the thing with EMF and blue light, which, as I said, to me are just the biggest problems we face right now. I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
got your seed oils and glyphosate. There's other issues, but I guarantee you in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, we're going to look back on our light environment and the level of EMF in our life, and it's going to be like DDT or asbestos, or when in the 40s when doctors recommended that smoking cigarettes is good for you. I mean, that literally happened.
Yeah.
So to your question about the phone, you can see my phone here in the video. I installed a widget on my home screen, and the widget
Mm-hmm.
has sleep, wake, red phone, blue phone. So
Okay.
if I hit sleep, it turns the phone screen red and turns off all the EMF. When I click wake, all the EMF and all the blue light turns on. If I hit red phone, the phone stays on, but all the blue light's killed and the screen turns totally red, like
Okay.
that.
Yep.
If I want the phone to still be asleep, but I want to be able to see it without the red light, then I hit blue phone, right? So it has 4 options, and I can send you a link to this widget. It's totally free.
Yeah.
I found it on a blog post, and you just follow the prompts, and your phone is then protected. And then there's a case on my phone made by a company called Safe Sleeve that's like a
Safe
little
sleep.
wallet case. And
Mm-hmm.
there's also a company called Defender Shield that makes a similar case. And what this does is it shields the EMF coming off the front side of your phone. So if I'm talking on the phone on speakerphone, which is the only
Mm-hmm.
way I would ever talk on the phone, the part of the phone that's facing my skull and my very valuable, precious brain, what's little left of it after all those years of drug abuse, I'm not radiating myself through the front of my phone. And if I have to have my phone turned on while it's in my pocket because I'm expecting a call or something, then I'll put the EMF shielded side toward my body. So it's not shooting EMF into my vital organs or, reproductive organs, God forbid, or anything like that. So
Yeah.
the phone case is a good way to protect your phone. And then that widget, the blue light killing widget, is another really good way. For anyone that doesn't want to do that, I'm just going to say, like, dudes and dudettes, if you are sleeping in your bed with your phone turned on and it is anywhere near you within like 20 feet, you're really hurting yourself for real.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who
So,
sleep with their phone literally, like I'm talking like in their bed next to them, like right there,
yeah,
like even in their pocket, they fall asleep with it in their hand. Like that is so
yeah,
common amongst my generation.
they're not safe. So at the very bare minimum, if you have to have your phone in your bed, which I do because I love to fall asleep to podcasts, it just puts me to sleep when I can't sleep, especially. Just put it on airplane mode. But the thing is, if you just hit the little airplane symbol on your iPhone, it usually doesn't turn off the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth, which is why I like this widget, because you go sleep and it just shuts down your whole phone.
Yep.
I mean, it'll still function, but it takes it completely offline.
Yep.
So that's the number one thing. And the number two thing, just as another free tip, is if you're not in a house where you can just hardwire everything on Ethernet, which is what we did in our house. So all the Sonos speakers, all the computers, the TV, everything is on Ethernet. There's no Wi-Fi anywhere. There's no smart refrigerator, smart washer and dryer. There's no smart anything in this whole house because it's all toxic. You can at least put your Wi-Fi router on a timer. So it goes off around the time you go to sleep and then it turns back on in the morning. So you're not getting that 2.4 or 5 gigahertz blasting your body all night long when you sleep. It's really, really important to do that. So keep your cell phone off at night, keep your Wi-Fi off at night as a bare minimum, just a starting point that isn't going to be a major inconvenience to you or the people you live with.
Okay. That is, I mean, it's amazing. And by the way, for people listening, all of that stuff, I'm going to find and put it in the show notes and the widget, all that stuff.
Yeah, just remind me, and I'll text you the widget, and it takes like 5 minutes. You just look at the blog post, follow the prompts on your iPhone. I think they actually have it for Androids too, and then you'll see once it's on your phone. You can't imagine how you ever had your phone without that widget installed because it's so easy. It's like one click.
Yeah.
Even at night, like if I want to use my phone to scroll or look at emails or whatever, I'll just turn it on red. And once you get used to the red phone at night when it's dark in your room,
my phone is always red. I've had it red for a long time now.
And then when you experience like sometimes I'll be in bed with my wife and she'll have her phone on normal, and it's like you're on a camping trip and someone comes in the tent with a flashlight and points it in your face.
Yes,
like when you get
so bright.
when you get pulled over and the cop is like points the light in your car. It's like so obnoxious. Once you get used to a red light phone at night, you'll never turn back. So I'll send you the widget. And for people listening too on any of the phone cases and stuff, I don't sell anything myself, but I do have a web store where I link out to all of my favorite products that I research and stuff. So there's a whole EMF section on my website with all these different devices and things you can put in your home that help you harmonize the EMF fields and stuff. There's thankfully a lot of really great technology that, helps our body be more resilient to the effects of EMF as well.
Awesome. I'm gonna on wax off. We usually do kind of like a lightning round of questions, and then I'll let you get out of here.
Sounds good.
How did you find your passion?
I found my passion through suffering.
How do you pursue your passion and not get burnt out?
I make sure to build into my lifestyle, which is why my podcast is called The Life Stylist, because it's about integrating different modalities and practices to help you have, a fulfilling and vital life. I personally have habituated myself to bake in a lot of self-care routines into my work day. I'm fortunate enough to work from home, which has its benefits and its downsides. Its downsides is you can easily not get your work done because you're at home. There's other stuff to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I take meditation breaks. I take little nap breaks. I jump in the ice bath. I might take a sauna. I take a walk. I go get in the sun. I'm constantly throughout the day taking little breaks to restore myself, to settle down my nervous system, to change my perspective, to stay grounded. So I'm not someone that believes in work harder to accomplish more. I'm someone that believes in work smarter to accomplish more without hurting yourself in the process.
Mm-hmm. If you could tell 18-year-old you one thing, what would you tell him?
I would tell 18-year-old Luke that you are absolutely perfect and deserving of love.
Hmm. What are 3 things that my generation should integrate into our lives?
Meditation, some form of therapeutic healing for the emotional harms you've endured in your life, no matter how insignificant they might seem to you. Everyone has had experiences in our childhood that scar us and give us some degree of PTSD, whether one of your parents was an alcoholic that beat you up, whether you were molested, those kind of things on the extreme end of the spectrum. But others have had really beautiful, loving parents and a family life, but you might have been the middle kid and your older brother was the football track star, perfect grades. Your younger sister was the famous ballerina and you're just kind of an average kid, and therefore you got ignored and didn't get nurturing and attention. And that's a different kind of emotional hurt. You might have been bullied in school or had a learning disability. We all have our challenges, but facing and addressing ways in which we've been emotionally hurt is really, really important, especially to begin that practice when you're young, because guess what? Life keeps hitting you. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's not like you go through challenges as a child and then you get to heal those and then you sing Kumbaya around the campfire forever. Life comes at you later on. There's divorces and lawsuits and people you love die. And, as you get older, it's not like you stop getting hurt, but you build resiliency and you build a skill set where you know how to process and heal from the experiences of life in real time. But if you don't go back, say you're 18, 17, go back and start to backfill and really start to address some of those things that you experienced when you were young, you'll never learn that skill and they'll keep compounding. And the maladaptations of dealing with those unhealed parts of yourself will start to actualize as negative patterns in your life. Your inability to, find your passion, to have the career you want, to be able to have the kind of relationships you want, and so on. So those would be 2. And the third would be to let go of the idea that you need to fit in. And to celebrate your uniqueness. And if you find you don't fit in the subculture or family in which you find yourself, to find a tribe and a community of people that understand you and love you and accept you for who you are. And it doesn't mean you have to throw away your existing friends and family. You just need, in that case, additional extended friends and family that do understand you and that you can fully be your authentic, messy, beautiful self with.
What is your favorite book?
My favorite book, I'll tell you the book that had the largest impact on my life. I don't know that it's my favorite book, but it's the book without which I don't know that I would be alive or be the man that I am today. And the name of that book, the title of the book, is Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's a book that contains the teachings of the 12 steps and was originally written, obviously, for alcoholics. It's referred to in recovery circles as the Big Book because it's a really big fat book. It has giant high like a huge font,
Yeah.
And it's funny, when they made that book, they made it really big and substantial so that they could charge enough money to keep their organization afloat because they didn't have any other way to make money.
Huh.
But that book is really something that changed my life and helped me understand the nature of addiction and alcoholism, and more than anything gave me the skill set to overcome it and to become free of those problems.
Wow. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. Thank you for being with me and getting to talk to me. And it's been a blast. Where can people find out more about you?
Thank you for inviting me. It's been really fun talking with
Of
you. It
course, yeah.
gives me faith in humanity to know there's a 17-year-old man out there who's, seeking truth and living it. So I applaud you for doing what you're doing and for having a podcast where you can share these messages with people, and hopefully people that are listening are younger people too, man, because it's like, dude, if I would have had someone like you to listen to when I was 17, probably would have had a much easier go at life, so thank you for
That really
having me.
means a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true, man. It's just true.
Yes.
Where people can find me, the number one coolest thing I do in the world, I think, is my podcast, The Life Stylist. I've had your dad on the show and a number of other luminaries in alternative health and spirituality and things like that. And then my main website is lukestorey.com. And from there, you'll find, my social media and YouTube and all the podcast past episodes, my online store, as I mentioned, with all of the biohealing products and services and things that I promote and use myself. But lukestorey.com is the mothership where you can find all of the other tentacles of my reach in the world.
Amazing. Well, thank you again for being on. Bye, everyone.